Okay, so rewriting using only positive exponents. Well, keep in mind, this is negative. You can't have negative exponents. So if I have a negative b, or a negative exponent with the b on the top, I got to move it to the bottom. If I have a negative exponent of c on top, I got to move that to the bottom. So you can't have negative exponents. To get rid of negative exponents, you need to flip them. By that I mean, if you have a negative exponent on top, you move that to the bottom. If you have a negative exponent on the bottom, you move it to the top. So it's like saying all this is over 1. So if all this is over 1, I'm going to take that b to the negative 4 and I'm going to move it down. I'm going to take that c to the negative 2 and I'm going to move it down. So I end up getting 5a, and on the bottom now I have b to the 4th and c squared. So rewrite using only positive exponents. Now I have them on the bottom. I have negative exponents on the bottom, so I got to move those to the top. So I have x to the negative 2 on the bottom. So when it's on the bottom, as I said before, we got to move that to the top. So that's a negative 2. Let's move it up top. So I get an x squared on top. That is a negative 1, so I get a y to the first power on top. So I end up with x squared y over 9. Rewrite using only positive exponents. Okay, well, don't make this look trickier than it is. This right here, what is anything to the 0? Anything to the 0 is 1, so really that's gone. So take this negative 1 through to everything. So when we do that, 3 to the 3 to the first times negative 1 becomes negative 1. Negative 2 times negative 1 is x squared, right? Negative 2 times negative 1 is x squared, or y squared. Now I have a negative exponent. I got to get rid of that. So if that's on the top, I need to move that to the bottom. So I get x squared y squared over 3. That's my final answer. Rewrite only using positives. Well, once again, anything to the 0 is 1, but only the 3 is to the 0. So this negative is still there. So it's a negative 1 on top. Now this is negative. That stays there. Only negative exponents flip. So don't start flipping negative numbers. Only negative exponents flip. Also, this 4 does not have a negative exponent with it. Only the x. So the 4 stays right where it is. Don't move the 4. Right? The 4 has a positive 1 as the exponent, so that stays. But this x is what moves. It's x to the negative 3. So I take that and I move it up top. So I get x cubed over 4, and that should be a negative because I still have a negative there. So yes, we got a negative x cubed over 4. So simplify that. Okay, I got a negative 45 and a negative 9. Let's take a look at just the numbers. Just divide them. Negative 45 divided by negative 9 is a positive 5. So we got a positive 5. Now taking a look at just the x's, I have an x cubed on top and an x to the first and the bottom. So 3 minus 1 is x squared. I have y cubed on top and y to the 7th. 3 minus 7 is negative 4, but remember that little rule I told you. Which one's bigger? The bottom, right? Which means that y is going to go on the bottom. So 3 minus 7 is negative 4. That means we get a y to the negative 4, but this needs to go to the bottom because it's negative. And there's your final answer. So now, another means to do these problems is to look at the exponent pairs. So I look at those two. 42 divided by negative 7. And that gives me a negative 6, x to the 4th and x squared. All right, since it's division, 4 minus 2 is 2, so we get an x squared. And which one's larger, right? The 4 is larger, which means it's going to go on the top. So our answer is going to go on top. If I look at the y's, y cubed and y to the 5th, which one's larger? The bottom, right? 5 is bigger than 3, which means our answer of y is going to go on the bottom. So we subtract, right, 5 minus 3 instead, you get a positive 2, and that goes in the bottom. All right, so now when doing this, put it together on the top and put it together on the bottom. So 2, and that's like a 1. So 2 times 1 is 2. And we have an x and an x squared. So there's my x and my x squared, and there's a y. On the bottom, we have a 4 and a y cubed, so nothing can go together. It's just 4 and y cubed. And on the top, x times x squared. That's like saying x to the first power, so 1 plus 2 is 3, so it's an x cubed. So the 2's, I have a 2 on top and a 4 on the bottom. Alright, the reason why I rewrote this whole thing out is just to show you a different way of how you can simplify this stuff. Okay, the 2 and the 4, I can simplify that to 1 over 2. The x's, there's no x's in the bottom, right? So the x's are all there, but there's one y in common, so I take it out. So I have 3 x's left on top and 2 y's in the bottom. So I get x cubed on top and y squared on the bottom. Do you have to do it that way? No, because that'll take forever. But the reason why I bring that to your attention is just so maybe some of you can see it in a different light, how the problems can be done. But you could have just sat here and said there is no other x's, so that's x cubed, and that's a 1. 1 minus 3 is negative 2, and you move that to the bottom. Okay, so we just go right across here again, and when we do so, 5 times negative 2 is negative 10, and we still have an 8 on the bottom because there's no other numbers. I have an x squared and x to the negative 1, so I add those. 2 plus negative 1 is just a positive 1. I have a y and a y. Y the first and y the first is y squared. On the bottom, nothing I can do, it's just cubed and a y. So now that's there, let's simplify the negative 10 and 8, and I can do that by taking a 2 out of them. So we get negative 5 over 4. I have an x and an x cubed, so which one's bigger? The bottom, which means my answer is going to go in the bottom. So 1 minus 3 is negative 2, so I move that x squared to the bottom, right? And then which one's bigger, top or bottom? The top. 2 minus 1 is 1, so I end up with a y on top. Taking a look at this one, just distribute that negative 2 through to everything. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. I have to take it through to that 2 as well, so that's 2 to the negative 2. And 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. Every single one that's negative, flip it. So basically all of them need to flip. That 2 squared goes on top, that x to the 8th goes on top, x to the negative 6 goes on the bottom to get x to the 6th, and that goes to the bottom to get y to the 4th. And now simplify what I can. That's 2 squared is 4. If you notice I have x's on both the top and the bottom, so let's simplify those. 8 minus 6 is 2. So it's x squared on top because the 8 is bigger than 6. And there's your final answer. And rewriting in scientific notation, we will do that when we come back.